Hello, dear students. Sorry for some problem. I could not take the class in the morning. But now that I am free, I am taking the class so that we do not miss it at any cost. If you are not available for this live class, then you will get the recording. And I'll upload this on YouTube as well so that you can watch it at your own time. So today we are going to study one of Shukumar Ray's poems. The name of the poem in Bengali is Kathburo, and in English it is called The Old Woodman. Okay, so let me quickly share my screen and let's begin. And I'm really sorry because I could not take the class in the morning because of some problem over here. And now that the problem is resolved, I'm taking this class. So once again, if you are unable to watch it right now, then please do watch it at your own time. Okay, and thank you so much for being so considerate. All right, so let me quickly share my screen. Okay, so today we are going to study Kathburo or the Old Woodman. I hope the screen is visible to you. Now, as we always do, let me first read it in Bengali, then I'll read the English, and then we will go into an analysis of the poem. So, Kathburo. হাঁড়ি নিয়ে দাড়ি মুখো কে যেন বৃদ্ধ রোদে বসে চেটে খায় ভিজে কাঠ সেদ্ধ মাথা নেড়ে গান করে গুনগুন সঙ্গীত ভাব দেখে মনে হয় না জানি কি পণ্ডিত বিডু বিডু কি যে বকে নাহি তার অর্থ আকাশেতে ঝুলঝলে কাঠে তাই গর্ত টেকো মাথা তেতে ওঠে গায়ে ছোটে ঘর্ম রেগে বলে কে বা বোঝে এসবের মর্ম আরে মূলো গাধাগুলো একেবারে অন্ধ বোঝে না কো কোনো কিছু খালি করে দ্বন্দ্ব কোন মাঠে কত রস জানে না কো তত্ত্ব একাদশী রাঠে কেন কাঠে হয় গর্ত আশেপাশে হিজিবিজি আঁকে কত অঙ্ক ফাটা কাঠ ফুটো কাঠ হিসেব অসংখ্য কোন ফুটো খেতে ভালো কোনটা বা মন্দ কোন কোন ফাটলের কিরকম গন্ধ কাঠে কাঠে ঠুকে ঠুকে করে ঠকাঠক শব্দ বলে জানি কোন কাঠ কিসে হয় জব্দ কাঠকুটো ঘেঁটে ঘুঁটে জানি আমি স্পষ্ট এ কাঠের বজ্জাতি কিসে হয় নষ্ট কোন কাঠ পোষ মানে কোন কাঠ শান্ত কোন কাঠ টিমটিমে কোনটা বা জ্যান্ত কোন কাঠে জ্ঞান নাই মিথ্যা কি সত্য আমি জানি কোন কাঠে কেন থাকে গর্ত. So you see, this is a very interesting way of putting it, because up till now we had never given really such thought to the fact of any tree or any log being so very important. And now, for the first time in our lives, we are coming to a conscious consideration where we are meeting an old woodman who is talking about such realities of life. Okay, so now let us try to understand what the old woodman is trying to say. The old man doesn't seem to mind the sun that's getting hotter. He hums a tune and mumbles words. He sits and licks a wooden stick that's just been boiled in water and shakes his balding head. It seems as if he's twice as wise as anybody dead. The holes you find in wood, he says, have reason to be there. They're caused, and no one knows this yet, by cobwebs in the air. But who cares for all this knowledge, screams the old man fuming. A bunch of dolts, that's what they are, pretending and presuming. I have told them time and time again, they haven't understood. What moonless nights are apt to do, the holes that go in with wood. Graphs and charts and formulas he scribbles on the wall, subdividing different types of wood and analyzing all. Tasty wood and tangy wood and wood that's hard to savor, and all that lies concealed in holes and all the hidden flavor. He claps the wooden sticks together, saying these are sticks which hold no secret from me now that I know all their tricks. all the wooden villainy and all the wooden wiles. This has become somehow A11, but it is all. Wooden ills and wooden woos and beaming wooden smiles. Some wood is wise and some is not, but holes are always there, and only I can see they're caused by cobwebs in the air. Now, if you try to understand this poem, let's also look at the Katburo over here. It's a very interesting drawing by Sukumar Ray. Now, let us try to analyze the poem. Okay. Now, what happens over here is that Katburo was first published in the children's magazine called Sandesh. I'm sorry, my laptop isn't working and therefore I have to work on my phone. So, Sandesh, which was first published in 1923. In Abul Tabul, it was first published in 1923. But in Sandesh, it was published in the Bengali year of 1322 in the Phalgun edition. Okay. I'm extremely sorry for my handwriting because I'm writing on my phone screen. So please excuse me. And as you know that the version of English that you are reading was published in the English translation of Abul Tabul, which is called Nonsense Rhymes. The translation was done by Satyajit Ray and it was published by Writers Workshop, Kolkata in 1970. Okay. Now, let's go into the details of the poem. Okay. Now, look. The Old Woodman. What is very significant about this title, or Katburo even, is that originally Sukumar intended to give the title Abul Tabul to this poem. So originally this poem had the title of Abul Tabul, and later only when Sukumar published the text by this name did he actually change the name to Katburo, and Satyajit translated it as the Old Woodman. Now, the Old Woodman doesn't seem to mind the sun that's getting hotter. Before I go into the analysis of the poem, let us talk a little bit about the background of the poem itself. Why was Sukumar writing about an old woodman? Now, this poem can be read in three ways. Okay. This poem can be read in three ways. From the perspectives of the philosopher, from the perspective of science, so from the perspective of philosophy, from the perspective of science, and from the perspective of psychoanalysis. Once again, I'm sorry for my handwriting. As you know, it's very difficult to write on your phone. Okay, so first, let us look at it from the perspective of philosophy. Okay, so if we look at the perspective of philosophy, we see that Sukumar was a part of the religious group, the reformist wing of the religious group called Brahmo Samaj. Okay. So here, what happened was that when Sukumar became a part of the Brahmo Samaj was already divided in two. There were the elders who were desperate to cling on to the old ways of life, and there were youngsters like Sukumar himself who decided that enough was enough and we need to become a little bit modern in our outlook if we have to keep the Brahmo Samaj running. So So what happened was that with Shukumar, the very interesting thing which took place was that Shukumar wrote a long poem. Okay, what was this long poem? The name of the long poem was অতীতের কথা. Okay, and in this poem, Shukumar primarily talked about the way that the Brahmo Samaj functioned. That is, here Shukumar was talking about the history of the Brahmo Samaj, and it was published in a small booklet to introduce the rationale of how the Brahmo Samaj functioned to the children. Okay. And Shukumar was also instrumental in bringing Rabindranath Tagore, the most famous Brahmo of his time, as a leader of the Samaj for a kind of modernization. Now, the Brahmo Samaj literally denotes a community of people who worship Brahman as the highest form of reality. That is, for them, Brahman or Brahmo is the supreme being who does not discriminate between race, gender, culture. He is monotheistic, and he is the eternal, the immutable being who is the creator, preserver of the universe. And if you look at the trust deed of Brahmo Samaj, of Brahmo Sabha, not Samaj. If you look at the trust deed of Brahmo Sabha, there you'll see trust deed of Brahmo Sabha, which was published in 1830. There you will see that Shukumar mentions the devout adoration of the, I'm quoting, the unsearchable, eternal, immutable being who is the author and preserver of the universe. Now, this unsearchable, eternal, immutable being who is the author and preserver of the universe is basically seen as the woodman himself. Because you see, if you look at the wood as a metaphor, then the tree or the wood, which is the source of all life form on this earth, it is the creation of nature. And the woodman who has understood nature itself, he holds a knowledge of religion itself, who holds a knowledge of creation itself. He can only be compared with two people. Okay. Number one is the Almighty. Because if you look at any religion, I mean, in most of the theological premises, they present the Almighty as a dogma. Why? Because he is incomprehensible. Be it the Christian God of the Bible, be it Allah of the Quran, be it the Krishna of Gita, you will see that God presents himself as incomprehensible. He is beyond human comprehension. And since he is beyond human comprehension, therefore what happens over here is that we have the picture, we have the understanding of a God who is beyond human comprehension. And therefore he cannot quite be fathomed by man himself. Also, here I am tempted to talk about Friedrich Nietzsche. Okay, Nietzsche in his book, Thus Spake Zarathustra, in this book, Nietzsche talks about God in the same line. But here, Nietzsche is not very new, because what happens is that long before Nietzsche, Plato, in his cave metaphor, talked about a similar philosopher who came out and understood the reality of the world. And when he came back to tell the world about the truths, what happened was that most people could not fathom what the philosopher was saying. Okay. And therefore, it became very important for Plato and Nietzsche to present this idea. Okay. But what we see here is very interesting. We see here a philosopher who cannot be understood, a philosopher who is beyond comprehension, as similar as the Woodman himself. So, this is my second notion, that is the Woodman as the philosopher who has some understanding of the world itself, which we do not understand, and therefore we do not understand the Woodman himself. Okay. Now, the second notion that we had talked about was the notion of science. Now, since you people study at a very prestigious college in Kolkata, which is named after the person who actually showed that plants show signs of life, Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose. So J.C. Bose was the person who first talked about plants showing signs of life. Now, the theory of a scientist who actually talked about plants showing life and who actually talked about it in great detail throughout his entire life, this also becomes very interesting. And previously, Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose was duped in his invention of the radio, which he could not patent because Marconi already had patented. So Sister Nivedita and the likes of her were very vocal about this invention or this great finding of Sir J.C. Bose. And therefore Shukumar also becomes a part of this movement where he tries to stand beside a fellow person, a fellow Bengali who is working miracles in the fields of science. Now, if we look at it from the perspective of psychoanalysis, we'll see that the madman has always been a very important figure, both in literature and in the thoughts about psychoanalysis. Now, I don't know if I have spoken about him. He's one of my most favorite philosophers. His name is Michel Foucault. Okay. Now, Michel Foucault was a philosopher who was very important in his own times and even in our times as well. Because Michel Foucault extensively dealt with these problems of madness. Especially, Foucault has two books. One is The History of Madness, okay, which is a very important book in its own right. And there is another book which is called Madness and Civilization. Okay, because it is a very important book. And in these two books, Foucault talks about how we have talked, how we have dealt with madness in the history of the world. Now, most of you know about one famous play. Sorry, let me write the name of the other book as well. Madness and Civilization. Okay. Now, most of you have heard about one major play by William Shakespeare. The name of the play is King Lear. Now, look, in this play, towards the end, when King Lear holds the body of his daughter, his dead daughter, whose name is Cordelia, Lear has already gone mad by this time. But what happens over here is that we see that people respect Lear and do not put him in an asylum. But nowadays, people do put other people in asylums. Because what happens is that mad people need to be put in asylums. That has been the natural way of looking at it. But try to understand, nobody puts King Lear in an asylum. If you try to find out, then you will see that in Greek and Roman civilizations, the madman was seen as enlightened. Why? Because the madman did not speak in the language of the commoners. So it was believed that the madman had some special knowledge which was very important. All right. But now, look, whenever we see a madman, what do? We try to put him in an asylum. Now, look, in the Greek times, even a poet was considered to be mad. And the poet was seen in a very high light. He was called poietes, which means maker. Now, it was a rank similar to God himself. Okay. And in the Roman times, a poet was called vates, which meant a seer or an oracle. So a poet could see beyond the scope of the common people. And therefore, you see that the poet was given such importance. And even Plato says that the poet writes in a state of madness, and he calls it enthusiasmos. Enthusiasmos, you can say, a state of being divinely possessed. So, divine possession, or as we commonly call it, divine madness. I know some of you might be poets, some of you might be really good poets, and I hope some of you actually are. Okay, but if I ask to the best of you that how do you get your inspiration for writing poetry? then I don't think that many of you will be able to tell me that how do you get your inspiration. If I want to talk about your poetic theory, if I want to talk about your poetic strategies, you might tell me 1,000 things. But if I ask you the simple thing, how do you get your inspiration? I'm sure none of you will be able to tell me. Why? Because Plato says that you are divinely possessed. And that's how you can write it. And that's how you every poet goes on about it. Now, this is also a state of divine madness. It is a state of possession. But if it is so, then you do not put a poet in an asylum. But nowadays, what happens is that when you get a madman, you put him in an asylum. Why? Because an asylum is a space which can be seen as a, in Foucault's terms, it can be seen as a heterotopia. What is a heterotopia? You have heard this term perhaps, which is utopia. Utopia is a very interesting construct. That is, it is a place which we believe is real, but which we know is not real. And therefore, heterotopia as a construct becomes very interesting. Why? Because we think of heterotopia in terms of, okay, let me not create any problems for you. Let me simplify it for you. Imagine you are in front of a mirror. Please do not laugh when I am drawing. I am not MF Hussain, so please do not expect me to be a great painter. So imagine this is a mirror and you are standing in front of this mirror. Now this mirror is reflecting your image. Okay. Now try to understand this. The reflection that you are seeing is you, but simultaneously the reflection is displaced from you and the reflection is not you. So it's simultaneously you and simultaneously not you. So it's a real space, but it is simultaneously not real. And this is what you call a heterotopia. Imagine, let me give you an example. Say, in heterotopias, there are several qualities. But say, if you are a child, okay, say you are a child of 2 years. So where do your parents send you? To a school? To a primary school, maybe a kindergarten, so on and so forth. Now imagine you are in your college and I send you to a kindergarten to study. Now that would be weird because you are not worthy of going to a primary school right now. You are more worthy perhaps or less worthy, I don't know. But your present situation does not give you the right to go to a primary school as a student. So similarly, what happens is, look at these constructs, school, or say prison, or say asylum, or say such other constructs like this. If we have to go to these places, we have to fulfill some basic requirements. Okay, like if you are mad, then only can you go to an asylum. If you are ill, then can only you go to a hospital. Otherwise, nobody wants to stay at a hospital. If you need education, you go to a school or a college. If you do some crime, then you go to the prison. So on and so forth. Okay. Now, what does this do? Let me very briefly put it to you so that you can easily understand it. Esplanade is very near your college. It's really near your college. Go to Esplanade on any day at any given morning at 10 a.m. I guarantee you, you will, or say at 11 a.m. I guarantee you, among the people that you see, 90% would not be children. 90% of them would not be madmen. 90% of the people that you see would not be ill. 90% of the people you will see uh, will not be of these groups. Okay. Why? Because then look what kind of people you will see. You will see working people, people who are really very busy. Why is it so that we will see only busy people? Because then it gives us a false sensibility that the society is well functioning. Why do we need this false security? Because then we will think that the society is well functioning, and it works on the simple principle that out of sight and out of mind. It works on this very simple principle. So here that Shukumar talks about Kathburo from the perspective of madness and philosophy is very interesting, at least to people like me. Now, I gave you the definition from the Western perspective. If I talk about it from the Eastern perspective, that is from the Indian perspective, and especially from the perspective of Shukumar Rai, then Shukumar Rai was going back to the Indian aesthetics. Okay, the Indian aesthetics were established long before Shukumar Rai by a certain person whose name was Bharat Muni in Natya Shastra. And in other texts as well. Now, what does the Indian aesthetic deal in? It deals in rasas. Like there is Veer Rasa, Karun Rasa, uh, Vasya Rasa, Shringar Rasa, so on and so forth. So many rasas are there. Now, out of these 9 rasas, Shukumar coined another rasa which is called Khayal Rasa, or as people call it, Khayal Rosh. Or you can write it Rasa, no problem. Now, Shukumar Rai's Khayal Rosh is basically the spirit of whimsy. It deals with the spirit of whimsy. Okay. Now, Satyajit himself said that it is not one of the 9 rasas of Indian dramatic theory. Now, there is a critic whose name is Michael Heyman. Michael Heyman. And Michael Heyman, when he talks about this Khayal Rasa, he says that it can very well be classified as the 10th rasa, which can be added to the existing 9 rasas which are already in function. So this 10th rasa is very interesting because this 10th rasa allows Shukumar to blend the Western consciousness with the Eastern sensibility. And this is the height of Indian theories, because here we see that Shukumar is talking about a certain rasa which is congruent to the Western idea of nonsense. And now, even if we treat the old man's language and the old man's knowledge and the old man's speech as gibberish, then also we see that it is a gibberish which is crucially epitomizing a subversive creative form of hybridity. Because whenever we talk of animals in the zoological idea, say when Darwin talked about the idea of evolution, Darwin talked about evolution, and we understood that, say, the dinosaurs have turned into chickens, the apes were one of our forefathers, so on and so forth. But in general, people are rarely interested about the rich history of botany in our world. Even I don't know how many of you have heard about this. Uh, there was a Bengali scientist whose name was Gopal something, I'm forgetting. He wrote a book called Banglar Kit Potongo, where he was talking about the insects of Bengal. And this is very interesting because you see, we haven't ever given any real thought to all these genres. And that Katburo uh, goes on with the spirit of whimsy and speaks gibberish and has his own world of imagination where there is no law, no logic, and he imagines the effects and affects of cobwebs in the air, of the sun, of the moon on the plants. It is very interesting. That is, he has his own set of logic to establish his own ideas. And if you look at it, you'll see that he hums a tune and he tastes boiled wood. He moves his head like a scholar, and then he gives his commentary about the holes which are caused in woods because of some cobwebs in air. And you will see that it totally betrays our knowledge of botany, that our very basic premise of knowledge that we have had in botany. Oh, acha, Banglar Kit Potongo is written by Gopal Chandra Bhattacharya. I have suddenly remembered his name. I have the book, and you can find the PDF very easily on the net. So, if you are interested in insects, I'm mortified by insects, and that's why I read this book to understand which are harmful and which are not. But in any case, if you are uh, interested, you can read this book. It is a very interesting book. So let's read the poem without further ado. The old man doesn't seem to mind the sun that's getting hotter. He hums a tune and mumbles words. He sits and licks a wooden stick that's just been boiled in water and shakes his balding head. It seems as if he's twice as wise as anybody dead. Here, look, Shukumar is following that Wordsworthian dictum which you see in The Solitary Reaper. So, if you have read the poem, well and good. If you haven't, then please read The Solitary Reaper, at least the first few lines. The Solitary Reaper by William Wordsworth. I'll just utter those lines which are relevant to my discussion. Behold her, single in the field, yon solitary highland lass, reaping and singing by herself, stop here, or gently pass. Now you see, over here the old man does not seem to mind the growing sun. Why? Because he is engrossed, he is enmeshed with his own work. And the sun is getting hotter because it's middle of the day, and the old man does not mind. He hums a tune and mumbles words because he is in his own world of imagination. He is in his own world of fitful fancy. He sits and licks a wooden stick that's just been boiled in water and shakes his balding head. It seems as if he's twice as wise as anybody dead. So he is basically maybe in the tradition of those people who were called the magicians or necromancers in the West. During the Renaissance, we had people like Roger Bacon, we had people like John Dee, we had people like uh, Cornelius Agrippa. We had people like, say, Erasmus, who were often considered as necromancers, who were often considered as um, alchemists. And their language was very, very problematic because they were dealing with science and the people could not understand them. And therefore, they thought that it was either gibberish or it was magical, it was witchcraft, and so on and so forth. So, what the old man is doing is very interesting. And look over here, Satyajit writes these, translates these two lines, which are very interesting. It seems as if he's twice as wise as anybody dead. So he has perhaps forgotten more about woods than we will ever learn about them. The holes you find in wood, he says, have reason to be there. They're caused, and no one knows this yet, by cobwebs in the air. Now, if you look at philosophy, okay, then there is an idea in philosophy, it's posited as an idea, that everything has a rationale, that the world is like this. The world is almost like an orange. It's not properly round, it's like an orange, because this was the shape which was desired. Remember when we were studying in our school in class 7 or 8, uh, we had a very popular question in physics, and the question was, why are raindrops round and not square or like a triangle? Why are raindrops round? Why are planets in the orb shape and not anything else? Because everything has a shape. Even if you uh, start questioning like Farhang Akhtar, Asma hai nila kyun, pani gila gila kyun, still everything has a reason, everything has a rationale. And philosophy always talks about that rationale, that everything has a rationality. Now, you see, uh, if you go back to our past, our cultural heritage, then you will see that Rishi Parashar, okay, first talked about plant life in India. Okay, and that is very interesting because long, long ago, Rishi Parashar was researching on the nature of plants. All right. So what happens is that uh, he was one of the pioneer of botany in the Vedic ages. And if you uh, look at the kind of discoveries that he made during that time, you'll see that he noted it in his uh, book. Okay, you'll see that he noted in his several books as well, where he talked about his findings about plants. And therefore, what happens is that uh, you'll find it's perhaps in Ayurveda Samhita. I've forgotten uh, which book it was. Just give me a moment. Let me check. Just give me a moment. 1 second. One second. I don't remember which book it was. I can't find it. But it was, found it. It was a book called Krishi Parasharam. Found it. Sorry, I keep on forgetting the name of books. So you see, Shukumar is not the first one who has spoken about plants. There have been many Katburos in India as well. So Shukumar is basically bringing together these diverse ideas in these simple lines. And if you understand, if you try to understand these lines, then you will see that the wholes, they stands for the cells and the kind of uh, basically the cellular structure of the tree. They are caused, and no one knows this yet, by cobwebs in the air. Now, cobwebs in the air can be a very interesting way of putting the universal structure. If you will see, then the tree occurs in several mythologies. It can be the Yggdrasil, sorry. It can be seen as the Yggdrasil of the Scandinavian or the Norse mythology. It can be seen as the Bodhi tree under which Lord Buddha found his enlightenment. It can be Pascal's thinking reed. And it can also be the Kalpataru of the Hindu concept. So all these trees have been thought about. And look, these trees are there as a mystical idea. And if you see, then if you look at our Puranas, then you will see that uh, there was a time when Brahma and Vishnu had a quarrel. And suddenly Shiva emerged himself as a tree, which went up to heaven and down to hell. And Brahma went to find the top of the tree, and Vishnu went to find the root of the tree. So this tree image is very important. And if you kind of connect it to science itself, you'll see that here the cobwebs in the air is perhaps a reference to the constellations of stars, to the universe itself. So the trees or life itself has come through different permutations and combinations which were already there in the universe itself. And here Ray talks about that in such a simple way. But look, nobody understands that. And then in the next line, since he is saying it in such a gibberish tone, he says, "But who cares for all this knowledge?" screams the old man fuming. "A bunch of dolls, that's what they are, pretending and presuming." Now, this is a very interesting idea which needs some explanation. And I think I'll deal with the explanation in the next class because it has been already too late and I do not want to keep you up for longer. So in the next class, I'll be talking about these issues in some detail because you see, this poem is not as simple as those earlier ones. I'll try to arrange a class tomorrow. Okay. Whenever I have time, because I have a packed schedule tomorrow. I have a lot of classes with Sim 5, Sim 1, and so on and so forth. So if I can arrange, I'll do it, and I'll finish this poem tomorrow, okay? So that we have some understanding of the poem. Thank you so much for attending this class, and I'll put this up on YouTube so that you can watch it at any point of time. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Good night.